submit underneath you.
I think you would be the Coyote because you hate fun, winning, and the underdog. Nick Ferguson, favorite movie, the Russian tragedy Disaster on Ice about the 1980 men's hockey team. 56690 is the text line. Couple of finals in. BYU wins its first March Madness game since Jimmer Fredette. 80-71 over VCU. Auburn, 83-63 over Alabama State. McNeese with the upset, 12-5, 69-67 over Clemson. Houston blew out SIU Edwardsville 78-40. Wisconsin 85-66 over Montana. Purdue 75-63 over High Point, located in North Carolina for those of you who did not know. And Creighton beat Louisville 89-75. KOA tournament updates presented by Xfinity. Stream live sports from the best seat in the house. And
by the way, Jimmer Fredette in the crowd at Ball Arena today.
There you go. Rooting them up. Speaking of the best seat in the house, let's go right out to Ball Arena, check in with KOA's own and iHeart Tournament bracket pool current leader, Kienan Dixon. Keenan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great because of that McNeese State win.
Well, I did not see that one coming. I mean, bracket's not busted yet because I have Clemson losing in the next one, and I was off on Creighton Louisville. I had Louisville losing in the next round. So bracket's not busted, but I'm a little behind and off the foot to start. How has the crowd been down there at Ball Arena thus far?
Well, it was a little bit light in the first game, but it filled in. I think a lot of it was BYU fans. We saw that in the second game. Those BYU fans really filled it up, and it really felt like it was kind of Provo in here. It got really loud during that second game, in some of those closer moments, but BYU, I mean, they can shoot. They didn't shoot as many threes as they normally do, but they got a ton of second chance opportunities. They have some big guys inside that, they were able to make some opportunities out of that. And VCU, they're an A-10 team. They don't have that type of size that, a Big 12 team like BYU does. So, that ultimately was kind of the difference in this one.
Keenan, how do you come down on this? Because we've been discussing this all show long. I'm a huge fan of a lot of the lower tier teams having that one shining moment to start off the tournament. But after the tournament gets going, I want to get down to the brass tacks of getting the best against the best. Are you of that same frame of mind, or are you leaning more towards both Ben and Grant and how they feel as though I just have the wrong frame of mind?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think the first weekend is for all the upsets. That's for all the fun stuff. And, maybe you get one or two 12 to kind of 15 range teams making it to the second weekend. But once it gets to the Elite Eight, I want to see the best 8 teams in the dance competing. And I think this year really sets up perfectly for that. We have really 6 teams that could be 1 seeds, and a couple of those 2 seeds that could be 1 seeds are Michigan State and St. John's, but these 1 seeds are ridiculous and head and shoulders above everybody. I saw Auburn have a little scare with Alabama State today, but then they put them away and really showed why they are the 1 overall team. So yeah, I love it. I think, San Diego State FAU a couple years ago when we had that matchup of a couple of mid-major teams in the Final Four was fun, but once we get to the second weekend, I want to see the best games, and I think we're going to get a ton of that this year.
Talking with Keenan Dixon down there at Ball Arena. You guys have a game coming up here in just a little bit. I believe Yale and A&M coming up here in a minute.
Yeah, Yale A&M 13-4 matchup, I believe, and this should be an interesting one too. I think Yale could really make a little bit of a run here. Anytime an Ivy League school gets kind of a 13 seed in the tournament, they're a dangerous squad, and Yale has won 16 of 17. Their only loss coming in the final weeks of the regular season to Harvard. They beat Princeton and Cornell in the Ivy League tournament, which are 2 very good teams. So I think that's going to be a tough matchup here for Texas A&M, who has kind of backed into the tournament. I mean, they've lost 5 of their last 7. Those only 2 wins came in the SEC tournament, which helped them get to the 4 line, which I kind of think they're overseeded here.
What do you think about these SEC teams? Because we come to know the SEC has been a football conference, but looking at some of the brackets of certain individuals, Ben has Florida, making
I've got 5 SEC teams in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I mean, is this that year where we're going to see a huge run, a deep run by the SEC teams?
Yeah, we had those years where the Big 12 was kind of the dominant conference for quite a while. When Kansas and Bill Self was winning all those conference regular season titles and everything. And that's really shifted. The SEC, obviously NIL, money, that has made a huge difference. But the SEC is clearly above the rest of the conferences when you look at the conferences as a whole. Now, did they deserve 14 teams in the tournament? I don't necessarily think so. I think some of those teams like Georgia and Oklahoma, really on the bubble. Texas, we saw them go out last night against Xavier. So I think they got the benefit of the doubt, right? And the SEC bias from football maybe have translated over to hoops, but I think it'll still make for a good tournament. I mean, Auburn and Florida, it's unfortunate that they're on the same side of the bracket because I would love to see that as a national title game.
Yeah, I think it's going to wind up being probably a Final Four game, though. It'll certainly be a fascinating matchup as far as that goes. Back to the Yale A&M game. It's going to be a tough task for Yale. Yale's a much more efficient basketball team. They shoot nearly 50% from the field versus A&M, who's not a great shooting team. But it is the Wade Taylor, the fourth show for A&M. On the Yale side, Nick Townsend really is kind of their best player. How do you think that Yale can win this? Do they have to sort of grind this out and make this a slower paced game?
I think so, and I think, they have to hit their shots. The three ball has to go for them. They have a guy in John Fulakidis who is a dangerous shooter. I think he's top 40 in the country in three-point percentage, around that 41% mark this season. So, you kind of look at the recipe for some of these big upsets and matchups like this, 13-4, 14-3 matchups. And a lot of it has to do with, can you shoot the ball? Can you stop the opposing team's big on the interior? And can you create some chaos and force some turnovers on the other end? We look later tonight, UC San Diego is tops in the country in turnover margin this year at like 7.5, which is 2 higher than the next tournament team, which is Marquette. So those are sort of the differences. And, if Fulakidis can hit some shots, if Yale can keep the game in their pace, right? That's the most important thing. You don't want to rush yourself. And obviously the bright lights, it's a big gym. And, the arena, I think there were 19,000 people here today. That's a far cry from Dartmouth, where I think there were maybe 1,000 or 2,000 for the Ivy League championship last weekend. So it's a much different scene here.
Well, looking from an original standpoint, the Buffs went out early when they lost to Houston. But tomorrow night you have number 5 Memphis facing off against Coach Medved and the CSU Rams. How far do you think that this Rams team can actually go, and can they make some noise?
Yeah, I think the Rams have a really good setup here if they can beat Memphis. Memphis is a dangerous team. Penny Hardaway getting back to the tournament. I think this is his 3rd tournament in 7 seasons at Memphis, which maybe is underperformed in his time there and maybe let down some Memphis fans and fans of Penny. But, I think if you beat Memphis, right, and we see the 12-5 upsets all the time. We saw McNeese do it today against Clemson. You do that tomorrow, and you kind of get set up with a good matchup, probably with Maryland, but Grand Canyon, who knows? They could go out and upset Maryland too. So, there are some potential situations where Colorado State could get to the second weekend. Now, you got to hit shots. You got to hit shots. You can't have those dry spells, right? You see the CBS graphic that pops up on the score bug every time the lower seed has like 3 or 4 minutes with a scoreless drought, and that's where your season ends pretty much as soon as that graphic pops up on the screen. So if Colorado State can hit some shots, keep the consistent scoring going, they're a dangerous squad, and they're playing some really good basketball right now.
Another interesting matchup coming up here. My beloved Arkansas Razorbacks taking on the Kansas Jayhawks. Neither one of these two teams finished the season all that strong. Razorbacks losing 2 of the last 5. Jayhawks losing 3 of the last 5. What do you think about this matchup and these two teams?
I think it's interesting, right? John Calipari in his first year at Arkansas trying to make something happen in a program which is, it's unique to leave a team where you've had so much success at Kentucky. You've built this empire, and then you go to Arkansas right next door and you try and build something up there. You barely sneak into the tournament, which I thought was impressive just for them to get there. I think they're playing some really good basketball. They're a dangerous squad. They obviously have a ton of talent on their roster, but so does Kansas, right? Like, if Zeke Mayo goes out tomorrow and hits a couple of big threes early, if he starts feeling himself for Kansas, and they start shooting the ball well. Hunter Dickinson gets involved early in that game, which he probably will. He's so consistent in this time of year. That could be a really fun matchup. It's interesting that that's a 10-7 matchup because those are two teams that, you would think would be much higher and maybe meet in the second weekend. So, I think that'll be interesting for Arkansas. Again, got to hit shots. And for Kansas, if Zeke Mayo can get involved early and start shooting the ball consistently, that's going to be a dangerous team to try to stop.
Well, in the East, there's a particular matchup that our producer, Grant Smith, has his eye on. It's number 4 Arizona versus number 13 Akron. Can you give him some, relief or something to uplift him? Because I mean, hope
you don't even like underdogs, Nick. How are you trying to give the underdog hope?
I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to help Grant out to relieve some of his stress, and I'm hoping Keenan can actually help with that. So, can you help give, I guess, Grant any kind of hope that Akron can beat Arizona? Anything that you can give.
Well, I'm shocked first that Grant is rooting for Akron as an Ohio U guy.
You got to support the MAC no matter what.
I guess so. You're right. Well, we may see some action. I know a lot of people are picking Akron over Arizona. I personally am. I hope that works out because that one comes with a little bit of bias. As a USC fan, I've struggled with Arizona for years. So, it's always nice to see the Wildcats lose. So I will say that. I think Akron's a dangerous team, too. MAC teams don't typically get that high in March, to the 13 line. Those are usually 15 or 14, sometimes 16 seeds. So for them to get to a 13 spot shows kind of the confidence that the committee has in them. Arizona is vulnerable this year. I think we've seen that over the course of the season. They're so good in Tucson, but once they leave Tucson, it's a completely different story. And, they're a little beat up by playing that Big 12 schedule. It's a much different schedule than the Pac-12 schedule that they've played in the past and dominated in the past. So, Grant, I think maybe there's a little bit of hope there. And, just understand that we're both in the same boat. We need Akron to win this.
There we go.
See, I've got Arizona going to the Final Four, so I'm on the opposite side of that one with you guys. Yeah, a little bit. You're talking with Kienan Dixon from the KOA News Department down there at Ball Arena. What's been your favorite moment so far, and what are you most looking forward to down there?
Favorite moment, probably that McNeese win. Will Wade, it's always good to see him, get a win. I think there was a lot of lack of confidence in going into this game after the news broke about the NC State job and him potentially taking that. I know he hasn't necessarily signed the dotted line yet, but I'm assuming that's going to happen, right? That was kind of the arrangement that he made going to McNeese for a couple of years. So that was fun. And just seeing the crowd react to that is Clemson tried to come back and cut it down to 2 points right at the end. Dangerous. Coming up, I think the UC San Diego Michigan matchup tonight, the late game, 8 o'clock tip, some of these games after dark, that's when the chaos happens. And, it gets late on the East Coast. UC San Diego, again, a team that creates a ton of chaos. Michigan, a team with a lot of size, a guy like Vladislav Golden. But, UC San Diego, I don't know. They have some scores. Nuate Jones and Tyler McGuy combining for 37 points. They've won 15 straight games. I think that's an interesting one. I personally picked Michigan, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. I think we need a buzzer beater to, kind of put a cherry on top of this first day.
When we look at March Madness, there's always a lot of uncertainties. And right now, Duke has got the number 1 seed in the East. And I guess arguably the top player, dare I say, in college basketball, Cooper Flagg, he's coming off an ankle injury. If he can't really be himself like he was all season long, how does that change the trajectory of the Duke Blue Devils, but also who comes out of the East?
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting, right? Those ankle injuries and the way that he twisted his ankle, it was very violent, right? It wasn't, I don't know. It was a pretty bad ankle injury. So, he'll probably get a cortisone shot, right, and try and feel a little bit better. But that's going to be tough to play on, and it's kind of a grind here. And these games are so physical. They're so tough. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they tip off tomorrow. I think they're going to cruise past Mount St. Mary's. No offense to that 16. They played well yesterday to get to tomorrow, but I think it changes how deep they can go. I think they could still get past Mississippi State or Baylor, and then that Arizona, Akron, Liberty, Oregon kind of group of four that they could run into. Liberty's another team that could be dangerous against an Oregon team that, Oregon always kind of finds a way in March. So it could be a Sweet 16 exit for Duke, which I think would shock a lot of people. And it's unfortunate because Duke has played such good basketball this season, and Cooper Flagg is an unbelievable player. And I think these are the moments where he would really shine.
Yeah, and that would be devastating for me because that's my one seed in the Final Four is Duke. But I got to ask you about your boys from Omaha. You giving them any chance against Rick Pitino and St. John's?
As much as I would like to, I don't think so. I think St. John's is a really tough team to beat. Their turnover margin is, I think, 5th in the country this year at +5. They put a lot of pressure on teams. Omaha is physical, and coming out of the Summit League, which is not a physical conference, there's not a ton of size there. They were a unique team in that conference, and the way that they rolled it was impressive. Chris Crutchfield and what he did with Markel Sutton and J.J. Watt and Tony Osborne, impressive stuff to roll through the Summit, win the Summit League title, get Omaha to their first ever NCAA tournament in his third year. But I think St. John's is playing really good basketball. They're a physical team. It's a different brand of hoops, right? You're taking guys from the Midwest, mid-major conference, and playing against one of the best teams in the country, really in the Big East. And it's a Rick Pitino squad. So I think that's the toughest part because they're so well coached every single year.
That they are. 19.5 is the spread on that. When you think Omaha can at least cover?
I think so. I think they're one of the best teams in the country at covering. I think the only times they haven't covered was maybe 3 or 4 times this season. So, no gambling advice or anything, but that could be an intriguing line there.
If you're betting the Omaha Mavericks, you might have a problem. We might need to call that gambler hotline.
Gambling problem? Call or text 1-800-GAMBLER.
Keenan, we appreciate it, brother. Out there at Ball Arena, Keenan Dixon out there on the scene at Ball Arena. We appreciate the updates out there, brother.
Absolutely.
All right, take care. Keenan Dixon live from out there at Ball Arena. As we